Welcome to Licensed Poetics, a podcast about creative storytelling. I'm your host, Fang Ling. And before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to thank those of you who came to our Quiet Reader event a few weeks ago. If you haven't heard about it, please follow us on Instagram at Licensed Poetics to stay up to date with the latest events in the LP community. You can also shoot us a DM to request a book to be reviewed or a future guest that you'd like to see on LP. Okay, I am so excited about today's episode because of our guest today. Dear listeners, I'd like to introduce the wonderful writer, editor, and critic, Claire Cao. Welcome.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, Claire. I've been an admirer of your work for a while now, really. I first noticed your name in a publication that I don't really remember which one now, but I think it was a short story written by you. And more recently, I read your review of the book Piranesi by Susanna Clark. Your review was published in Mianjin. And for the listeners who don't know, Mianjin is probably the most established and is respected literary journal in Australia. So that's super impressive. And I read that book this year and I actually reviewed it in one of our previous episodes. Our listeners would know. And I guess as an aspiring writer, my dream would be to be published in Mianjin one day. So I loved your review of Piranesi on there. Your thoughts were really different to mine, but they're very insightful and interesting. So yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thanks for having me. And I listened to your review of Piranesi, and I honestly really agree with you. I think we took different angles, but I thought I especially agreed with how the first half was more magical and special than the second half. So even though I love the whole book, but yeah.
Thanks for listening. I think when I started LP, my dream was to one day to be able to invite guests like you. So it is really
gosh, so nice.
A dream come true moment for me. So let me first read your very impressive bio.
Oh my gosh. I'm reading the bio reading.
Yeah. So our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Okay. Claire Cao is a writer, editor, and critic from Western Sydney. She has been published in The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald, Art Review, Mianjin, and more. She was formerly a fiction editor at VoiceWorks and a screenwriter for the feature film Here Out West. In 2022, she was a mentee at AFTR's Talent Camp 2022 and was Kill Your Darling's new critic. She is currently the film editor for The Big Issue Australia and a 2024 recipient of the Next Chapter scheme. Yeah, VoiceWorks, one of my old poems was actually published in VoiceWorks a few years ago.
It was one of the best kind of springboards ever. I feel like all my skills are from VoiceWorks, basically.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I'm really excited to learn more about that from you. And for today's episode, we'll do the usual reading update section, and then I will bombard you with questions about the editing process because I'm really curious about that, and also some writers' career-related questions that I'm sure any aspiring writers listening right now are very interested in. Okay, cool. So I'll just start with my own reading update. Yeah. I have two books that I've been reading recently. They're very different from each other, and I wonder if I'm the only human alive on the planet that's currently reading this combination of books.
I mean, I thought it was a unique combination when you told me.
Yeah, honestly, I often feel like that. I don't know if
I feel the same.
Yeah,
because I'm also a SFF reader, so
sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah, sci-fi
for anyone
fantasy.
Who doesn't know.
And I'm always I should read more other stuff. So it's a balance.
I think it's so important to read widely. Sometimes I even think that's more important than the volume that you read is the genre, across genre and type. So the first book that I've been reading is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. And the other book is Happening by Annie Ernaux. Yeah, very different, but I'll talk about them. So Ready Player One is a popular young adult sci-fi adventure book, and many people will probably have heard of the movie adaptation that came out a while ago. Emily, a previous guest on Licensed Poetics, actually mentioned the book because she thought the book was much better than the movie. And Derek, another LP alumnus, lent me his copy of the book. So I'm reading that right now. And we follow this teenager who lives in this dystopian world where all the natural resources of the earth are depleted and the world is plunged into poverty and unrest, and people live in these massive trailer parks where the trailers are stacked on top of each other. I feel like that's like an iconic scene from the movie that you might remember. And then the entire world plays this very sophisticated virtual reality video game called Oasis. And the video game is like so realistic and so much better than most people's real lives in this dystopian world. And the story is about this teenage boy hunting a really valuable Easter egg that's hidden in the game. Many people are hunting for this very valuable Easter egg in the game, but then it's this kid who is an underdog and from like a impoverished neighborhood who solves the first major clue. And I'm up to this bit right now in the book, and to be completely honest, I'm a bit bored.
Oh, you're bored?
Yeah. I think it's crazy because it's meant to be like a gripping adventure story.
I feel
right?
like your pitch, I mean, like your summary of the plot made it sound very interesting.
Right? Yeah, and that's why I'm shocked that I find it boring, because I don't know if it's because I have seen the movie already, but that was a good many years ago, and I don't even remember them.
Is it the prose or like the characterization in the book?
It's predictable.
Yeah.
Like the writing style is not bad. I can get what's happening, but it's definitely not super original.
Yeah.
And then the first major clue that he figures out, right? Like I figured it out within like one page.
You're like, how is everyone in this world not figuring out
exactly.
this clue? And people in real life are crazy. Like the Reddit threads is like, no way he's the first person.
And, like, the creator of that big video game kind of left behind a few lines of poetry that's like the clue. And then it was like, I'll go to the place where you learn. And I was like, oh, do you mean a school? And then he's like, yes, a school. Wow, no one had ever thought of that before.
But like, are schools like extinct or something in this world? Like, what's going on?
I have no idea. Like, all these kids go to school in the Oasis anyway. So like, it's like the most obvious thing.
That's so funny.
I can kind of see it developing into a typical underdog to hero story, and then the friends that he would make along the way would be like the typical friends.
Yeah, would help him.
In an adventure. And then the love interest that I know will come up a bit later on. And then the writing style is like super easy to read, but I'm just a bit disengaged and unmotivated to continue.
Yeah. I mean, I actually haven't seen the movie. I just like have seen clips and heard of it. It kind of hit like that uncanny valley. Like Spielberg is like such a, obviously amazing director, but I feel like
wait, it was by Spielberg?
Yeah, I think so. Am I wrong? I think it is. My God. Yeah, it was by him. Oh. But sorry if I'm wrong. My film credit taken away. But like I'm pretty sure it was Spielberg. But like I think it looked a bit uncanny. Like, so I think I didn't find it visually appealing from the trailers, so I never watched it. But
I think I watched this so many years ago. I was very young back then, and then my standards for things were definitely lower. I found the movie fun, but if I were to watch it again now, I wonder what I will think of it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I might just DNF this book and watch the movie again.
Like, from my very limited knowledge of this book, I feel like, in the movie, I feel like the appeal is obviously like, it was in that like really
young
peak nostalgia
era.
Exactly,
80s
for
nostalgia.
the 80s, and like because like the film recreates like scenes from The Shining and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, right. Maybe the book will do that eventually, because the book is like, because the creator of that video game is into 80s stuff.
Yeah.
So in order to solve his puzzles, you have to know the 80s references. I guess if you're into that, you'll definitely find this book interesting. But yeah, so that's one book I'm reading. And the other book that I have finished and loved was Happening by Annie Ernaux. Annie Ernaux was an author that I discovered last year. Her book, Simple Passion, was one of my favorite books of 2023. And Annie Ernaux, she's a French author, and she's known for writing about her own experiences in a very precise, unsentimental, and almost clinical way. And her genre, I guess, would be memoir or personal essay. So very different from the book that I talked about earlier. And this book, Happening, was first published in 2000. And I'll just read the short blurb on the back because I think that will summarize it really well. In 1963, Annie Ernaux, 23 and unattached, realizes she is pregnant. This is the story, written 40 years later, of a trauma Ernaux never overcame. In a France where abortion was illegal, she attempted in vain to self-administer the abortion with a knitting needle. Fearful and desperate, she finally located an abortionist and ends up in hospital, where she nearly dies. In Happening, Ernaux sifts through her memories and her journal entries dating from those days. Clearly, cleanly, she gleans the meanings of her experience.
I've actually seen the film adaptation of this.
What? There's a film adaptation?
It came out last year.
How is that possible?
It's by Audrey Dewan, and it came out last year, and it was like an amazing film.
You like it?
I really loved it. Yeah, I thought it was very. I mean, I'm interested in reading her prose because I feel like that might be more unique, I think. Because like there are quite a lot of like kind of these like abortion like character studies in film, but I don't know, I thought that film, it felt very like unique, it felt very like visceral and intimate and amazing acting. Wow.
It would be completely different if it were to be conveyed in film form. Definitely. Like I was actually shocked because this is like, how's this memoir. A movie?
It is a movie.
How do you make it into a movie?
Yeah.
And the reason I love this book so much is the writing style. It honestly is the best writing style for personal essay that I have ever read. Wow. The best approach. Because I'm sure you've noticed this as well in your own writing and also in reading other people's, that when you're writing personal essay, self-absorption is a really easy trap to fall into. And then especially when you're writing about your own experience, right? And I have definitely made this mistake too. Like I have produced a fair share of self-absorbed writing.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to kind of describe what it means, but I think it's when a writer is really stuck in their own head and unable or unwilling to look back at their experience in order to form an analysis.
Yeah.
I think when that happens, it really obstructs the truth and it makes the reader like, it is frustrating to read because you feel like you can't get to the bottom of things.
Yeah.
But then like Annie Ernaux does not do that at all. She very calmly, this is written 40 years after the experience, so that distance definitely helped. She very calmly looks back and recreates her experience and like really analyzes it and provides a perspective on it. And this is a book about abortion, but she's totally uninterested in any sort of moralizing at all. Like she's not trying to paint herself as a victim or as a perpetrator, and she's not like trying to subject the people around her to moral judgment in any way, because like all she wants to do is to record the truth of her experience. And there's something I just so admire about that.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like she's a scientist and making an observation of the world. And I guess this is the type of truth seeking that is like so difficult and takes so much courage. So I just, when I read this book, I'm just like really impressed by her courage that she's able to write in such a way.
It does take courage to, I think, see your situation clearly. Also to recognize it as something that's like not fully knowable as well. Because like, I think like, like with a lot of personal essays, it's not just kind of the self-absorption, because I think like you have to be kind of absorbed in self to like write about yourself. But it's like also just kind of like the like myth making of your past and like romanticizing things. And I mean, I think that's like probably like unavoidable for a lot of people because you want things to make sense in your life. You want to be like, this led to this and this is why I have a profound insight. And the need to like have a conclusion on like your experience and be like, it was worth something or like it led to something. But a lot of time it doesn't. Like it just happened to you and it affects you for life, but you can't really understand it. And like the seeking of that in a really clear-headed way is like interesting.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Yeah. There's that idea of like, I went through so much pain and now I'm more special than I used to be before.
I'm more I can make money off being how special I am.
Oh, no.
Not to be derogatory about the personal essay writing because I love personal essays. And I also sometimes like it when the person is quite like delusional. Like, because like people are haters, but like then they're talking about it. They're like analyzing. I like psychoanalyzing people, which is probably not good, but like.
I think there is a big difference in like making like the person making bad decisions versus the person that's writing about the bad decisions. Like I also love reading about people who make mistakes or like people who do terrible things. Even Annie Ernaux's book that I read last year, Simple Passion, that was about her affair with a married man. Like it's hard to say that was a good decision in any way, but like again, like she somehow bypasses that in her writing, and she's just interested in the truth and not interested in like any sort of performance that can be gained from it. And I'd like to share a quote actually from the book.
Please do.
It's a very short book, by the way. It's less than 100 pages. And it really felt like she just said what she needed to say and not a single word more. So here's this really great passage that I love. When I write, I must guard against lyrical outbursts such as anger or pain. I would not want crying or shouting to feature in this text because they barely featured in my life at the time. Above all, I wish to capture the impression of a steady flow of unhappiness conveyed by a pharmacist's inquisitive attitude or the sight of a hairbrush by a steaming basin of water.
That's so gorgeous.
I know, right? Yeah, I love what she said. Like, she's not trying to dramatize anything. Yeah. And she's just trying to capture life.
I need to read her like ASAP.
Yeah, I'm like shoving Annie Ernaux down everyone's throats right now. Even
it works.
Even in that quiet reader event, I brought a few copies of her book and I successfully got some people hooked onto her already.
Yes.
Shout out to Andrew. Oh yeah, another aspect is that she's known for reflecting on the French working class because that's her background. Yep. That's where she came from. I think it provides a really interesting perspective on her experiences. So I really enjoyed that aspect. But yeah, I think that's it for my reading update. My two very different books that I've been reading. I can't wait to decide what to read next, you know?
How do you like usually decide what to read? Yeah, I'm like currently reading, I haven't really started properly, so I can't say I'm reading it, but I'm about to read like Birds of America by Lorrie Moore. I don't know.
No, I haven't heard of
but I think like you might like enjoy that because like it's also she's also a very like unsentimental, clear-eyed writer. So yeah.
Is it a fiction?
She's a short story fiction writer, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not reading anything else right now, but I recently read 2 books by Melissa Broder, who I just like absolutely love. Like I think she's so great. Like her first book was The Pisces, which is like the fish sex one. The cover is so iconic. But like the Shape of Water era. But I haven't read that one, but I read Milkfed. Her second book,
Milkfed. Yeah. I've seen it in bookshops. Is that the one with
the big nipple?
Yeah,
abstract nipple. But yeah, because I feel like I was never been enticed by like anything I've heard about that book, and it's quite polarizing. But I finally just read it because my friend loved it, and yeah, it was great. I loved it so much. I thought like she has a very like specific voice. Like she's very like tongue in cheek. You just feel like you're with like a really cool lady who has like lived like a really exciting life. Like that's how it feels to read her stuff.
That cover makes sense now when you mention her style.
It's actually like a very dark book because it's basically about this woman who is living in LA who I think she's like 30 and she's working in like agency for like actors and stuff, and she's dealing with like quite like a dark relationship with her mother and like a difficult relationship with her mother who she's trying to cut off, and she's struggling with the eating.
Milkfed.
She's struggling with the
Makes sense now.
with the eating disorder, which is like the main kind of hook of the book, I guess. And then she enters into a new romance with this woman who doesn't have any of those issues with eating that she has, which it sounds like so grim, but it's actually like not like that tone at all. Like I think the reason it's polarizing is that it's quite she has these like sexual fantasies that are very like that people find disgusting and
let me guess, is it mommy issues?
Yeah, very mommy issues related. And not that I like condone that stuff, but I feel like it's just like it really like represents like kind of women in a way that I feel is like scars and all, and like they're like brassy and funny and they're vibrant, which I don't sometimes feel like, especially like in like books about like relationships between women, like sometimes like
too serious.
It comes sometimes like cold and unerotic.
Okay, yeah.
Like I think this book is sexy. Like it's like
wow.
Yeah, it's like it's very like energizing to read, I think, and I felt very moved by the end. I thought it was just a beautiful book.
Oh my god, I'm about to read it.
I mean, I'm interested in your thoughts because you might be like, "What the hell?" when you read
I can stomach some freaky stuff.
Yeah, like I feel like the transgressiveness with like female sexuality was very refreshing, and yeah.
Wow, that's great. Thanks for sharing.
And her other book, Death Valley, her most recent one, it's like her style, her funny, like her humor, like with handling a dark topic is still present, but it's very different. It's more like meditative and like about grief or like pre-grieving almost. It's about this woman who her father is kind of like on his, or like they all think he's on his deathbed. He's in like in hospital, and she also has a husband that suffers from chronic pain, and she just kind of like spontaneously goes into like the California desert. And there's like a magical realism aspect of a magic cactus.
A magic cactus in Death Valley.
Yeah, in Death Valley. And like she can enter the magic cactus and there's visions there. Yeah, I think like her style is so accessible and just so unique. I think like the way she phrases things, she's so funny. It makes like all this like really heavy stuff just feel natural, because like, you know, in real life, like all this depressing stuff kind of exists alongside like absurdity and humor. So I just think it's like the perfect sweet spot for me.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff when you like cry and laugh at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. When you're just like laughing hysterically and you start like tears start spouting out of your eyes.
Honestly, that's the kind of stuff that I want to write. You know,
yeah,
I want to be funny, but I also want it to be like really profound and also depressing kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So like let me know if you read.
Will do. I will report back to LP. Cool. I think that's it for our reading update section. And now let's move on to the questions for Claire.
Oh gosh.
Okay. What sort of writing have you edited before? Fiction, non-fiction, poetry, or any else?
So for VoiceWorks, which is like my first kind of editing experience, I was like in the fiction team. So we kind of like vetted all the submissions, we selected, and then each of us would get like for each like round of each magazine, we'd get assigned like one of the stories, and then we would work really closely with like the writer to edit. And that remains like the closest kind of like editing relationship I've ever had with like writers, because in VoiceWorks they go through like sometimes they go through like 10 rounds. At least when I was there, like it's very intimate, I think, and like it's like so helpful for young writers, I think. So that was like my fiction kind of experience with editing. And then since becoming like editor at like The Big Issue, it's mostly nonfiction, so it's like criticism or like feature essays, which are all our feature essays are usually like for film, it's usually an interview, so interview feature, so that would be nonfiction. And yeah, so like that's like my primary experience, but I also have a lot of experience in like selection, because I've read for prizes and like I read for like Big Issue selection, fiction for the fiction edition. Because we have a big fiction edition for everyone who wants to submit stories.
The Big Issue?
Yeah, it's coming up soon, I think. Yeah. And and the fiction edition is always very beautiful. Like you get like an illustration and stuff. Me plugging the magazine.
Yeah, this is the place to do it. Yeah, I'm so curious about the selection process. So okay, let's be brutally honest here. What makes you say no to a work immediately?
Oh gosh, it's so hard because like I think recently I've kind of because I used to be so like hardline about stuff. Like I used to be like, this is good writing and this is bad writing. And I just don't believe in that as much anymore in terms of like, I feel like there's a lot of like, you can't really say like, it's hard to be like as prescriptive about things for me now, because I think there's such a huge range of what makes a writing good. But I think the main thing is definitely like, because at VoiceWorks, I don't really remember like the exact categories, but we would rate like stories based on categories. So it'd be like clarity, originality, I think like stuff like that. Yeah, like around that like flow or style or something like that.
Yeah. So clarity, originality.
Yeah. I wish I remember the exact categories. So it's been a while, but I do remember clarity and originality very clearly. And I think like that's a huge thing, like clarity. And like feeling engaged with a story. So like I think you can immediately tell when like the prose is just like not clear. It's like very confusing, like what is like they're doing in terms of like the language, like, or the language is pedestrian. I think that's the main thing. Like if it feels very like, oh, this is written like full of cliches, that like phrases I've read a million times before. It's not like I guess that's the originality part. And if I think character was another one, maybe like characterization of the characters. And yeah, like so I think uniformly, like what, you know, a short story, it's like you want to be like grabbed and you want to find it unique and you want to find it beautiful sometimes. Yeah. And often you can just tell straight away when it isn't, like I think.
Ouch. Because even for voice works, right? Like what, 5% of pieces that are submitted get selected?
I think I don't really know what the numbers are now, but I think there is a huge amount of submissions for fiction, especially. So we had to read a large volume. So yeah, it's always going to be like a narrow margin. But this is like also another thing I've learnt though about like submissions and like being on the other side of like kind of selection and editing is that there is that level of like, oh, is there some works that you just kind of immediately feel are cliched or aren't, you know, like aren't provocative or interesting. But it also really depends on like consensus of like the selection team.
It's subjective.
So because like I guess at VoiceWorks, like I remember like everyone kind of had the same like taste almost. I mean, like there was disagreements, but it was always like, you know, everyone's quite young. Everyone likes reading about generally reading about young people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And like I think like there was like a lot of interest in things that were a bit more like disgusting or like or like provocative or shocking or inventive, I guess. But like at the big issue, like because I've done fiction selection with like for like basically me, like the times I've done fiction selection, it was like me and a different editor, and then we go to the editorial team, and like there's a bigger range of ages, and it's like very different opinions. Like so, and both at VoiceWorks and the big issue, there were stories that I thought were just like I was like I love this. Like this is my favorite story from this round. I like and. Other people hated it. I feel like, and especially with a bigger like pool of different people, like the opinions are like varied of like what kind of stories they love, what kind of like writing they think is like good or interesting. Like it's all very subjective. So like your story can be something that someone like really loves and guns for, but it doesn't get in.
I see.
And it is a matter of taste at the end of the day, which is so elusive. And I can't. And like I think it's for me, it's like a culture shock because I'm like, oh, like my opinion isn't like representing the opinions of others.
Wow. So who would have the final say? The editor, the chief editor?
I mean, well, usually it's a matter of voting.
Okay.
And also, like, I don't know if it's the same. I don't know if I can even talk about this, but like, I know that like at some magazines, it's also like the makeup of like the stories selected. Okay. So like how they complement each other, because like sometimes you don't want the same story, like kind of same tone.
That makes sense, like because you want to put together an issue.
You want the variety you want. So like sometimes stories get dropped because they don't fit. And like so I just feel like there's like so many variables as well. And sometimes I remember at VoiceWorks because like sometimes it was like the pool wasn't as like rich as like, and sometimes it's like very competitive. It's like there's so many like really, really good stories that you can't.
It's timing
you have to
as
drop
well.
some of them. Yeah. So it's actually like you actually can't know like why your story was rejected specifically, like sometimes, unless they give you detailed feedback,
which they never.
Which often don't have time.
VoiceWorks sometimes give feedback. Yeah. Wow, that was great.
Yeah, so it's information stream.
Yeah. So in terms of what do you think is the difference between a good editor and a bad editor, or like a helpful editing process and an unhelpful one?
As an editor, I do feel this urge, but I feel like some editors like really kind of steamroll writers and they like write over them and like have full lines that like you didn't write.
Ooh,
and they insert that into the text, which I feel like is not what you should be doing. But
so what do you think you should do instead?
I mean, you should be like giving feedback and be like, can you find a different phrase or way of saying this? Like, this is what I think this section is not working, but like, what are your thoughts? But the thing is, like, a lot of editors are under the pump. They're like not really like being paid well. They're not like, it's like maybe sometimes not even a full-time position. And they have like a real crunch of deadlines, so they do that obviously. Okay. But yeah, it does make a writer feel quite like, because like sometimes like there have been pieces where I'm like, there's a whole paragraph I didn't write. Like that's in the final copy and it's attached to your name.
Wow.
So it feels a bit odd. Yeah. And I just feel like it shouldn't be like that. Like I feel like if you have an issue with the line, you can make suggestions. Like that's what I usually do. Like I'm like, can you, like, here's my suggested line. Like, what do you think about it? Like, can you take it? Like, do you want this line or do you want to reword it so it's more in your voice? Yeah. So like that's kind of what I try to do. But like sometimes I get it though. Like sometimes you're like, oh, like this is just not what you want it to be.
And then like you can see how you would write it better and you just tell them.
Yeah, I mean not better, but like I think it's like you see what it needs. And but then it's really good to give them the option to reword and to like, but like I remember like with short, like I think it was edited once. I wrote a short story for like this online publication called Running Dog. And it was like Hannah and Naomi, shout out. I don't know if they're listening to this, but they edited like a short story I wrote. And I remember like the way I like when it was submitted, it was just like not very like, I just was not proud of the story at all. But it was like their kind of observations about the story and being like their suggestions and like being able to bounce off them and their thoughts about like the ending. Like they really helped me shape that through their feedback. And that was such a satisfying experience because like at the end I was really proud of that story. I still am. And I'm like, you know, like it wouldn't have happened in that form without like having an editor that like read your work closely and and just really
I think you're totally right. Like it's so helpful when you have an editor or a friend, if it's not a professional editor, who can help you see the goal of your piece and then like give you directions on how you can make that clearer. One thing that I've realized in editing, but also in, I guess, writing workshops where you're working on a piece together with a group of people, is that sometimes you put out a piece and then they'll say, this line is unclear. Or like they'll say, this line, what do you mean here? And then your first instinct as the writer is to explain to them what it means or like what you're supposed to get when you're up to that point. When really, as a writer, the way you should handle that is you should say, oh, so it's unclear. So how should I make the answer more clear in the text itself rather than explaining like on the side in response to your question? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like it's kind of like, it's a way of like thinking, like it makes you reflect about your craft more, and that's what it should be.
Yeah.
And like that doesn't mean that like other people are always right. Like sometimes you're just like like you get feedback that you're like, what? Like and then you complain about to your friends. But
sometimes people don't read carefully enough.
I think that is true. That first kind of instinct of self-reflection is really important. And like even if you arrive at like I'm right, like it's still like, you know, I'm thinking about like whether like their thoughts are helping me grow as a writer. And it's really important because you get so inside your work when you're writing and you like don't really you can't really see certain things and patterns, whereas like editors spot that. Like I feel like especially with like book reviewing. I've done a few book reviews for Mianjin and like Shertan. One of the best editors ever. Like you should definitely try and work with her. But like I think like that process like helped me notice like sometimes I'm a bit hesitant to like criticize, or like I write around issues, and like that really helped me. Like the feedback really helped me kind of narrow in a lot more.
Yeah, you're right. I think like when you're writing, obviously you try to anticipate what the reader will think as they read your piece, right? But you can never really know until a good editor tells you that.
Yeah, exactly.
As a writer, like what do you think a writer can do to help with the editing process? Like how should they respond or behave? And have you ever worked with writers who cannot handle feedback well?
So with helping editors, like I think if it's a person, like the things I kind of secretly want sometimes from some people is that like I think some writers like they can, like I've worked with a few times, they don't feel bad anyone who I've worked with. It's not serious, but like sometimes like you give quite consistent feedback about like something they've been doing, and like they don't really kind of take it onto heart into like reflecting on their writing, which is not like a huge issue, but I just think it's sometimes hard for people to like identify those things and to improve on them. But yeah, it'd be good to like, just thinking about like, what did they say last time? Like, how can I like, like if this is the style for this like publication, because often it's like, it's not an issue with how you write. It's like just the audience of this publication.
Yeah.
Or it's a style that you're writing in. For example, like an academic film essay is so different to like a review in a magazine. So like, I feel like being like diligent about that kind of stuff is really like great and helpful. If you want to push back, then just do like that's. I don't find an issue with that. Like I'm like I like to know where their mind is at and what they think, and being really direct about like how they feel about why they chose to do something.
Yeah,
and sometimes like they explain why they chose a certain line or did things a certain way, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. Like maybe other people get that too, and I don't. You know what I mean? So it's a conversation. Just being really present for that conversation. I've had bad experiences, but I don't really want to talk about them in case it's very obvious who I'm talking about. But it's usually things to do with like that I've been guilty of in the past, like time management. It's just not unprofessionalism. But yeah, like I think that's something you have to deal with all the time. Like just panic over time.
But I think even especially in terms of writing and also young writers, because writing tends to be pretty personal, right? So it's hard to be professional when it is like your personal things being talked about, I guess. Yeah, I think I kind of understand.
There has been defensiveness that I've dealt with. Yeah. But I never had like anyone who was rude or terrible like in that way. Good. But I have like I think like other editors I've worked with have dealt with that before. Like they've dealt with people being very like stubborn and quite like aggressive. But
no.
At the end of the day, it is just writing. Like, but it is very personal, and I think people feel especially. I don't know if it's even like a young thing, because I feel like people get really proud when they're older as well.
Oh, you're totally right. Yeah, I take it back.
I think young people are definitely more like forthright sometimes about things.
But I think editing is so important. Even the book that I talked about last week, The 3-Body Problem, I was saying how like it could use a much better editor, and it would have helped it so much.
Interesting. Do you think that's also like because I've been like considering reading that, and then people keep being like, oh, the book is kind of like hard to like the prose isn't great, but maybe it's a translation. Like, do you think it's are you reading it in Chinese or like?
I read it in Chinese.
Oh, so it's bad in Chinese too.
Yeah. I would say it's even worse in Chinese.
Oh my god! Oh no! Everyone's like, it's the translation.
I think Ken Liu's translation made it better.
Oh yeah,
and I'm not the only person who thinks.
I was gonna say like Ken Liu's great. Like I doubt that he's making it worse. Like,
exactly. No, it's not. Like if anything, he helped. Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks for the super cool discussion about the editing process. Next, I have some career questions. So, you've been published in The Guardian and Sydney Morning Herald, huge places. So, were you invited to write for them, or did you pitch an idea to them?
I think for both, it was like they approached because they were looking for like a specific thing. It's like a specific kind of person to write that piece, and it was like through knowing people, which is like it's always not like such a great thing. Because I think it's demoralizing for young people who want to write for big publications.
Ouch.
But no, like it is quite difficult to get into like a lot of like magazines or kind of publications that get a lot of submissions or get a lot of pitches. But I think they're really like, we need someone that we can trust to deliver, or like someone, and they're quite reticent about that kind of stuff. Which is, I mean, not saying like these two publications specifically are like that, because I haven't really tried to get into them by other avenues.
I see.
But yeah, like I think, but I did get to those. Like, I think I did get published in those based on them hearing about me and like thinking I was right for a specific piece.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it film reviews that you wrote for them?
So no, one of them was for Sydney Morning Herald. It was a profile on Tracy Leanne.
Oh, Tracy Leanne. Everything. What?
All that's left unsaid.
Oh, that's,
But so it was like it was a interview. So I like she, it was in Cabramatta. It was really fun actually. Like she came to Cabramatta, and then we had like an interview over like pho and stuff.
Oh, and you live in Cabramatta.
Yeah,
right? So you are definitely the right person to write that piece.
So it was a profile on her and her book.
And in terms of being a critic, I don't know if I'm interested enough in like being like a literary critic, because I obviously love reviewing books and I love reading other people's review of books.
Yeah.
And but I don't know, like, what does it take to be a critic? Like, how creative do you really get to be? And like, do you ever worry about offending people?
I'm like offending people. I have offended people, I think. No. But I mean, I'm not even particularly like, I don't think I'm quite like a harsh critic or someone who...
I would be if I know,
I love your reviews, so they're great. What does it take to be a critic? It's really difficult for me to put into words, but I do like love it as a medium. Like I think it's just like, it's such a disrespected medium from artists. It is, because you know, like I'm on both sides and I just hear like every like kind of circle I've been in, they're always like critics, like how have you why don't they make something of their own? I'm like,
it's like, what does it take in a person's life for them to become a critic? You know, they just sit there and judge and not make anything of their own.
I know, like it just shows like how hurt people, like artists, get about their
Butthurt. Oh my god, grow up.
Because artists are like some of the meanest people I've met about other people's work, like their peers' work. They'll be saying this stuff. It's like, how dare you say it in a public forum? We're just like, you know. But I think like, because I think for me, like criticism, well, firstly, like critics used to have a lot more power. Now they do not. And so I think you're just literally stomping on people who are being paid $5. Like, but I think like I've since I was little, I like loved reading criticism. Like even for stuff that I would never watch, I would read like reviews.
Yeah, I totally relate to that.
I think criticism is more about illumination. Like it's not for the artist; it's for like people who consume art, who read, who want to think more deeply.
You're so right.
Who want to think more deeply about the work. These people, like critics, love art. They're people who like I think want to engage on your work on a deeper level and take you seriously. And like that's why I think it's actually like it's a really important part of like the ecosystem. And like criticism that's been neutered, that's just like PR pieces basically.
Like, get that out of my face.
Like it's not doing anything. Like it makes stuff dead. It makes stuff like, it kills the conversation, the life cycle of like a piece. Because like that's what you want for your piece to be, right? Something that people are engaging with intellectually, emotionally, are thinking about, continuing the conversation. And it's such an important part of like why we do this, like
I know
why we read, why we watch stuff.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. The criticism is not for the artist, it's for the public and the reading public. So have you ever offended people?
Have I ever offended people? Yes, I randomly offended this actor once, which I won't like get into it, but like it was like such a mild review. Like it was a 3-star. Like I was not. I mean, sorry if you. Like, I don't think he'd be listening to this, but like I won't say who it is. But like they called like my like workplace and were complaining about the review, and I was like, wow.
Oh my god! Wait, did you write the review for the workplace or?
It was for the magazine. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
they called the magazine. Oh.
I know. But it was fine. Like my boss was just like laughing, but like it was so funny. Like. I was like, wow, my 5 minutes of like being read by someone who's I'm pretty like, I don't think I go as hard as I want to sometimes.
Oh, okay.
But I do feel like especially with book reviewing, like I think the Australian scene is very small. And sometimes I do think about that. I'm like, the person probably has read this, like, and you have to like write knowing that like the writer is probably gonna read it. And I think it's hard to be both a critic and an artist. Like, I think if I was to become an artist, like full, like in earnest to a level I was happy with, I probably wouldn't write criticism anymore. Yeah, but I think it's because you're so enmeshed. But like, maybe I'm just a coward. I don't know. There's some takedown pieces that are gleeful and like are designed for like clicks and like being screenshot and like posted on Twitter, and like that stuff gets exhausting too.
Yeah,
but I think like if you think that like if you think that you're being fair to the public and to yourself, I'm like, I guess I don't care. The author is
stand by your opinions.
Yeah. I mean, like, because I'm not engaging with them as a person. It's like their art, the work that they put out. And like my own personal opinion.
Yeah, that was super interesting. So I guess in terms of just being a writer, would you like to share your long-term goals as a writer?
Sure. I mean, I think I'm a bit like confused about that.
We all are.
I know. I'm like just stumbling through this thing we call life. But I do like definitely want to work in the film industry. Like that's been, or like even or TV industry. Like I've been kind of wavering on that recently. But I think like lifelong dream to like write for screen in some way. But like I think like my lifelong dream, like since I was a kid, was to like write like a fantasy novel. But like fantasy or horror. I think like horror. I'm leaning towards horror these days a lot. And my manuscript right now for like the fellowship is a horror book. So
the Wheeler Center Fellowship.
Yeah. The draft is about it's definitely in the horror genre more so than fantasy.
Yeah. So was that a fellowship that you received to work on your novel?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Which is exciting. Yeah. And I have like an amazing mentor. So like Tamsin Muir. I don't know if you know her, but she wrote Gideon the Ninth, and I think she's just like so amazing. Like I could talk about her endlessly.
It's good to have mentors.
I think she's made me like realize that it's definitely like a horror book, and like I want to be exploring that genre more. But yeah, so I'm like I guess they're quite like different mediums, but like I think I'm focusing on like the lit side more now. Yeah, because I've recently started enjoying writing more, which is like don't jinx it, like knock on wood.
It's okay to like do it and then come back to it.
Yeah.
If you're interested to learn about my goals at all.
Yeah, I am interested. Yeah. What are your goals?
So I think I've been published in a few small places right now, and last year I won a prize, which was the Inner West Creatives Prize.
Oh, congrats! I heard of that prize.
Yeah. Funnily enough, Michael's son was the judge for that one.
Yeah, we're good friends.
He gave me a fantastic judge's comment on my winning piece. So thank you very much to Michael.
Can I read it online?
Yeah, you can. I'll send you the link.
Send me a link.
So I really enjoy writing satire, especially political satire. Yeah. What I want to write is basically The Catcher in the Rye, but for a Chinese girl.
Oh my god, I would read the hell out of that.
Thank you.
That's amazing
so
pitch.
much.
Like you already have the elevator pitch. Like
yes.
Like when people pitch for like TV, they're always like, imagine like this cross of this.
Yeah. Honestly, exactly.
Like, that comp, I'm like, it's so clear. Like
I think I figured this out a while ago now. It's going to be set in a Chinese high school, which is where I grew up, and I'm thinking there should also be an adult side as well, so it might like cut between the adult and the teenage years. So yeah, I guess that's my goal for now. So what advice do you have for me and also for other young writers out there who are trying to get published?
I mean, I published in like more like literary journals, magazines, because I don't know much about, like, I'm also in the absolute same boat as you, trying to write, like get a start on like a novel. Like I feel like it's very overwhelming. Like it's overwhelming when you think about it in terms of like the whole size of it. But when you think of it in like chunks, it's a lot more like comforting and like just like picking away at like what you want to do and the characters and the voice. Like that part's really fun. I think thinking about how big it is makes you feel
so stressful.
But in terms of like getting published, this is kind of obvious thing, but I feel like a lot of people always overlook it. But like whenever like look at like the publications you're aiming for and like read all the stuff there. Like I feel like a lot of people like often write like submit and they don't seem to know much about like the actual magazine or like the style or like whether it suits them. So I think like just like really focus on like the stuff, like the publications you want to get into, like learn about their style, like read the stuff there. Like I think don't be disappointed as well. Like I think like rejection, like one, like, you know, I listed all the reasons why we reject things for like selection, and like it's often really like up to the winds of fate. I think just like keep at it. Resilience is really like the main thing.
Resilience.
Reading the publication, like learning how to pitch. Like if you want to hit me up, anyone, I can tell you like how I used to pitch. And what else I would say, like also like if you don't get a reply, like don't like make you feel bad. Like I hope it doesn't make you feel bad. Like it's often like, you know, those things that you can't control. I think also like focus on your craft, like get it to the place you want it to be. Like don't worry so much about like where you've been published, because like ultimately like if your writing is good, people will recognize that, and like, or if it's like suited towards publication, they'll be like, okay, like it doesn't matter like if you've been published in like The Guardian or whatever. Like and like also thinking about like what you want from writing and like what makes you like what drives you or makes you happy, because like some people don't get like any bylines or don't get published in anything, but they work on a novel and get that published. You know what I mean? Like that's where their energy is going.
It's one way to do it.
Like do you want to be like a freelancer and be in that grind, because that does require like a lot of like kind of like persistence. And looking at also my other advice about looking at programs that like assist like emerging writers. So like one of the best programs in my entire life that I've attended was like Critic's Campus for that Melbourne Film Festival International Film Festival runs. That's how I kind of got started as a critic, to be honest. It's like this intensive kind of like 1 week lab during the festival.
What's it called again?
Critic's Campus, and it's like yearly. Best experience of my life, maybe. Like,
oh my god! Wow.
Yeah, not to overhype it, because I've been told I do that a lot, but like it's really that good.
It does sound amazing.
And there's heaps of like programs like that out there. I think like being really. I used to like always refresh this like writing in. There was kind of like a grants update website or something, or like a program updates. Yeah, there's heaps of like stuff out there. Just being across that.
That's great advice. Thank you. What about, I want to hear you talk about the note takers. Is that the name? Note taking. So note taking is like my main kind of job right now, which was random because I didn't intend it to be. But so it's like basically like an assistant role in TV writers' rooms where you are, it's like kind of like minute taking, but it's for like 6 hours, and you're like recording like the flow of the conversation and you're categorizing it. So like because in a writer's room they're like breaking down the entire, like they're breaking down the story, they're plotting, they're coming up with like material for the Bible sometimes. So you're like, and they're having like these like kind of conversations about it, and often you're trying to like condense the conversation and to like the decisions that they make, and then you're like categorizing it into like character, into questions, into like plot. That's basically the job of a note taker. Because I got into it because like for Here Out West, they like Here Out West also started off from a great program run by Co-Curious. If young people are into screen and are from Western Sydney, Co-Curious is a great company to look into. And Here Out West was made also by Vaughn, who was our previous guest.
Last episode. As part of that, they like the AWG, which is Australian Writers Guild, they ran like a note-taking workshop. I don't know if they still offer that, but like I think there probably like are options to like where they're trying to nurture young writers. And then that was like the one kind of lesson I took on note taking. Everything else like kind of learned on the job. You just got into it. And then like after that note taking class, they put you on a register. So like, a few people found me through that. And then like, I don't really know how I feel like unfortunately in writing, a lot of like writing careers, a lot of things are random. Like
it's less
it is very luck based. And it is just kind of putting yourself out there constantly, and then because like, you know, the thing that you learn is that a lot of people are very connected from like the beginning, like when they're young, and then like I kind of like had to build stuff based on like I'm just from like Western Sydney, and my parents are like not in the arts at all. Like once you start putting yourself out there, once you start meeting people, once you start like getting really involved in projects, and like what people are looking for is that you have like an original voice. Like that's all you want to establish, right?
Wow.
That you have an original, that you have a unique voice, and that you have a voice that is very attached to you as a person, as a creative. So like, so I met quite a few people through like here out west and through like that film scene, and then Vaughn actually got me one of my first note-taking jobs for his show.
Shout out to Vaughn.
Yeah, thank you, Vaughn. I love Vaughn so much. I cold emailed someone because I really wanted to work for this company. I don't usually do that. My friend does that a lot, but honestly, sometimes it really pays off. People cold email me all the time.
Oh, including me, by the way.
Oh, yeah, including you, yeah. And, like, it's very intimidating, but, like, the worst thing they can say is, like, no or ignore you. You know what I mean? Once you're, like, literally, like, once you start doing it, like, your name just gets passed around because they're always looking for note takers. But I will say, if you want to be a screenwriter, it's much better to like focus on. I mean, note taking is great because you really get to see how
you're in the room.
Yeah, you're in the room. You really get to see how shows are made, like in development phase. So you get to see how shows are plotted. It's also helped with like my plotting of like the
the novel that you're working on. Wow,
like,
that's great.
Because
I need plotting.
I'm
not a good plotter.
So like you see a lot of different plotting styles because like especially we work across a range of companies like and a range of shows. Like it's very different how people handle their room sometimes, and you get to see like very different like creative discussions, and you hear like, I think my favorite part is just hearing about like people's lives because it gets really personal. Yeah, because like people often tell like really personal stories in order to like find like the story of like a character.
Oh my god.
So I know some really deep things about people, and like because I think it's normal now to me, but like I sometimes like not that I like recite like their personal stories, but I sometimes like kind of like I'm like people are just talking about their sex lives, and it's just like where you work, like what's going on? I'm like
wow, that sounds like a workplace that I want to be in.
Hear about like a lot of like interesting people, but like some people like I think like if you do too much note taking and you're seen as like a good note taker, you kind of like
get stuck in that.
You're pigeonholed as a note taker, and you can't really advance. And it's much more like if you want to be a screenwriter, it's much more important to like put your own work out there, like make your own thing, and like that's all kind of what I was saying about like having a distinct voice, and like people knowing that you have that voice. I still recommend it. I think it's really great. I think you should really know like what the industry you're getting into is like. Yeah. Wow,
that's fantastic advice. That was super interesting. I learned so much from our conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad. This is me rambling. If I ever presented any industry inaccurately, I'm sorry.
Well, let them find LP and come and attack me. I don't give a.
But you can like send me hate on my website.
Okay, I think this is a good place to wrap up this episode of Licensed Poetics. I hope you have enjoyed listening as much as we have enjoyed this wonderful discussion. Thank you so much to Claire for being here.
So happy being here and like hearing your thoughts about books as well. Like, I really want to read more Annie. Yeah.
I'm a good bookseller. Thank you again for listening to Licensed Poetics. I'm your host, Fang Ling. I'll see you in our next episode. Bye.
Bye.